So, Ryan, I want to begin with the offensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to go 4 keys to victory on the offensive side of the ball. And there's going to be a common theme to both sides of the ball when it comes to keys to victory, Ryan, which you and I kind of set up yesterday. And, that is it's going to be the line of scrimmage, right? But so we're going to have some of that stuff through. We're going to have some big play themes through. But I think there's a bigger picture aspect to the importance on offense, Ryan, that even goes beyond that kind of incorporates all the next 3 things that we're going to talk about. And that is, I really think it's important for this Notre Dame offense to start fast. And I'm going to explain it. And there's 2 reasons why, Ryan, and you tell me what you think. Number one, practically speaking, it's good for your offense to jump on BYU to then put pressure on the BYU offense. As you and I stated yesterday, we don't believe this team is as good of a play from behind team as North Carolina is, right? For a host of reasons. And one of those is we don't think they have the ability to be that, okay, just next play, you've been shutting them down, bam, 80-yard touchdown. You're shutting them down, 70-yard touchdown. They don't have that ability the way that Notre Dame, that North Carolina had, especially if Puka Nacua is not healthy or doesn't play. So I think that's a big part of it. They're not a great play from behind team. And number 2, and this is more big picture, Ryan, and maybe even more important to me, this offense is still, to me, a little bit of a fragile football team psyche-wise. Yes, the North Carolina game was good, but I'm still worried that if they come out and struggle and all of a sudden we see flashes of early Cal, Marshall, Ohio State, that the confidence that they gained from Carolina could quickly go away if they're getting punched in the mouth and not having success against BYU. Now, I don't mean if they go 3 and out the first drive, it's, oh, here we go again, we suck. But,
right.
if they kind of have a slow first quarter, first half, that could create some problems. Now, again, they didn't start fast against North Carolina, but again, that's because we started to see some of the stuff we saw before. We don't want to see that again. We need to see this team kind of come out and say, hey, we gained the confidence last week. We've built it through the bye week. Now we're ready to get rolling. That's another reason. And I think if you can get that confidence early, BYU is going to have a very hard time stopping this Notre Dame offense if they come out confident and start executing at a high level and come out right away and just kind of swarm them. I think that's going to be hard for BYU to handle.
Well, we talked about it yesterday, Brian. Like this is a unit where Notre Dame has struggled the first couple games, especially offensive line wise. So it was a situation where I think there's 2 outcomes. You come out and you just have early success, and it just kind of reiterates like, hey, we can do this, man. Like, we're all right. We can do this. We're a good offensive line. We're a good running game. We're a good offensive unit potentially. Or it's deflating early on and things get hard again. And then you kind of have that that come back to reality type of moment where it's like, oh, maybe we should be second guessing ourselves. Maybe the defensive line was more the problem, or the defense was more the problem last week, 2 weeks ago, than what our offense is actually capable of doing. So I think that is a big part of this test. I mentioned it yesterday early on. I will know a lot of this team, at least running the football wise, very early in this game. First couple of drives, I will have a big indication of if this team is truly heading in the right direction or if North Carolina is just that bad. I think it's one or the other. I don't necessarily think that, well, I think it could be somewhere in the middle, but the matter of fact is I think from a mental standpoint, that's where it's going to be for this team. Either they're going to capitalize and keep the momentum running, or it's going to be kind of back to reality a little bit.
I think key number 2, Ryan, and this is what we talked a lot about early and we hinted at before, the line of scrimmage is going to be very important in this game. And, we went away from establish the run, and we're going a little bit broader to establish the line of scrimmage because it's really important. And not only do they establish the run, that's point number 1. Like we talked about it yesterday, they've got to come out and run the football because that's who this team is. They're not using their best weapons all of their best weapons in the pass game. Hopefully that changes in this game. I hope we see that. But as of right now, it's not happening. We're not seeing Tobias Merriweather. We're not seeing Eli Rarid and Holden States being used in the pass game. They're starting to use more. We saw the backs be more involved the last 2 weeks. Lorenzo Stiles stepped up. Mayer's always been a big part of it. They're not using enough. So one way to complement that or counter that is to have a really dominant ground attack. That's who this team needs to be. So early in the game, it's important to come out and do that. It does a lot of different aspects to it, Ryan. We talked yesterday about you need to have early down success. Establishing line of scrimmage in the run game does that. It allows you to move the chains effectively. It allows you to force BYU doesn't like to put numbers in the box. Like, I actually think to some degree they're okay giving up 6-7 yard gains. They're okay with you running for 200 yards if it's on 50 carries. I really believe that they believe that, because then they can keep the points down a little bit and let their offense win. I think that they take kind of an approach that Notre Dame under Clark Lee took against USC. I want USC to run the ball against us. That's what Clark Lee's strategy was. Please run it against us, because that's not what you do best. I think a lot of in BYU kind of has that mentality where they feel like they can rally to the ball and limit the big plays in the run game, which protects them and their overall lack of really top-level athleticism on the perimeter. And so if you establish the run and you force them to kind of condense their backers, force them to bring their safeties even more down and focus on the run game, that's how you can then set up some big plays in the pass game. But that's also the second key to this, Ryan, is there are going to be some pass game opportunities and needs in this game. Establishing line of scrimmage also entails giving Drew Pine time to throw the football, because that then ties into point one, which is Drew Pine's got to start hot fast too. He's got to keep building on that confidence that he clearly became more and more confident in the North Carolina game. Like when he took off running on that 12-yard gain on 3rd and 8, you could just kind of see a little bit of a pep in his step, and his execution just immediately, like, he's like, you know what? Hey, I got this, right? I'm going to be okay. Right. Like, and then all of a sudden Drew's like, bam, 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 ball's going where it needs to go. I think we need to see that again too, but the line's got to give him the time that it did not give Tyler Buchner against Ohio State, that it did not give Tyler Buchner against Marshall, that it did not give Drew Pine early against Cal, to be honest with you. If they can give him that time as part of his establishment line of scrimmage, then I think it's going to be very, very hard for BYU to have a chance to win this game. Because if you're not getting pressure on Tyler Buchner, eventually the Notre Dame receiver is going to come open, and Drew's going to get the ball where it needs to get to, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree, Ryan. I think that for me, we've seen over the 4 games, right? When the offensive line plays well, everybody else plays well, right? Like, I mean, that's something that no matter what era of football you were in, right, where it was a heavy run game, triple option, whether it is now with the wide open spread,
it's true in it's true in Mike Leach's "we never run the ball" offense too, Ryan. You're absolutely correct.
100%. The one thing that is always true, no matter what offense you come from, no matter what area you come from, is if your offensive line plays really well, your offense is probably going to do pretty well. Like, that is just the point blank, man. It's always a key to victory for every team. It doesn't matter what the emphasis is, what your run pass split is. It doesn't matter what scheme you run. Offensive line dictates and gives you a very good indicator of how your offense plays, right? And how you win football games, really. Like, that's why most teams still are built inside and out. That's how teams win. So I think it's huge because sorry, I just accidentally muted myself. On paper, Notre Dame has all the now you're muted, telling me something while I'm muted.
No, like, that's weird. Like, we both just got, like, I didn't hit the mute button. So, like, it happened right after you. Like, you're in the middle of talking and you get muted, which I was going to laugh as a first. And then all of a sudden I got muted while I was talking. So I have emailed StreamYard this week.
Maybe StreamYard muted both of us.
I now have something new to email StreamYard about and be annoyed about this week. No,
I have no idea.
Please continue before that crazy interruption.
No, I mean, I was at the end of the point anyway, right? It's a simple fact of Notre Dame's offensive line has the chance to be a tone setter for this football game. Mm-hmm. And that happens every single week. And it is incredibly true in this week, because I think that BYU's defensive line is not a great unit. I think there's a couple individual players that I really like, but I don't think it's a great unit overall. And I think Notre Dame has the advantage there. So let's see if it comes to fruition. But I like Notre Dame's chances if the offensive line plays really well, as I will every single week until the end of time.
Notre Dame can beat every single team they play this year in the regular season if their offensive line plays well. It doesn't guarantee a win. It just means they can. Now, of course, if the offensive line plays great and the quarterback still throws 4 interceptions, you're going to lose. My point is, there are teams they can't beat if the line doesn't play well. They can't beat Clemson if the offensive line doesn't play well, unless the Clemson offense plays even worse, right? Like, there's always exceptions to those type of things. But if they play well, they can play with anybody on their schedule, in my opinion, every single one. So we'll find out if that's true. I think the third thing is, Ryan, is part of the fast start, part of control line of scrimmage is about creating an efficiency on offense. That's going to be very important. And one of the things that those things play into is being good on 3rd down, right? Which we talked about yesterday. And we didn't want to just repeat all the things that we discussed yesterday. But first down success is important. Third down success is important. Efficiency is going to be super important in this game. However, if Notre Dame is going to beat BYU and, more importantly, set themselves up for a run coming out of this game, they're going to have to do more to create big plays. And I'm not talking about like 35-yard gains and 20-yard touchdowns, big plays in the red zone. I'm talking about they have to scare teams a little bit with big plays, which means run game big plays and pass game big plays. In my opinion, there's something that Tommy Rees said yesterday in his press conference, or it would be Tuesday now in his press conference, that I did like. Some of the comments he made after the press conference in the one-on-ones with media, I didn't like. But what he said in the press conference was he felt the pass game actually helped the run game. I think he's right. North Carolina was not showing respect in Notre Dame's pass game. That allowed them to hit some big play opportunities, which then softened up the North Carolina defense, allowed Notre Dame to start attacking the middle of the field more and start attacking the perimeter a little bit more, and it made for a really balanced offense. But right now, part of the reason that Notre Dame doesn't have – I had a friend of mine ask me – I think I might have said this in yesterday's show, Ryan, or I just told you on the phone. But this is why we got to stop talking so much on the phone and talking ball, because I can't remember what we talked about on the phone. And Sean and I have the same problem, or what we talked about in the show. But he asked, he said, I don't know if Audric Estime, has enough speed to be a big play guy. I said, well, what makes you say that? And he goes, well, he hasn't really ripped off any big runs. And I was like, well, he does have a 36-yard catch and a 29-yard against Carolina. I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think Chris Tyree has big play speed? He goes, oh, absolutely. I said, well, what's Chris Tyree's longest run of the year? He just kind of paused, like, that's a good point. Big runs are not just about the offensive line. If the offensive line does their job and opens up a huge hole, but they are not respecting your perimeter ability at all, those safeties are standing there at 8 yards. Yep. And it's a lot harder to rip off those big runs. A lot of the big runs that we've seen in the past were because you did have to respect Javon McKinley one-on-one outside. You did have to respect, Cole Kmet or Chase Claypool or, whoever the different tight ends have been for Notre Dame, Michael Mayer, Tommy Tremble, all those different type of guys that had shown the ability to kind of hit plays downfield. Well, I guess I shouldn't add Michael Mayer to that make plays down the field category, because they haven't really used him to do that yet. But the point is there were other things to worry about than just the run. And even in 2017, you had to worry about Brandon Wimbush throwing the ball over your head. You had to respect it, and you had to respect Brandon Wimbush running outside. So there was other weapons that you could worry about other than just the inside zone. Well, they don't have that kind of running threat at quarterback. So Tommy Rees is going to have to find ways to generate big plays down the field in this game, not trick plays like a boot. That was a great call. Great call. That's an important piece of the offense. This isn't to diminish that or the wheel route to Logan Diggs at all. But you just can't always go to those things every single game. Like, you kind of use those bullets in this game, and you may not be able to use them again for a few games, right? But you are going to have to show the ability to throw the ball down the field successfully. That comes from 4 different things, Ryan. Number 1, scheme. You got to scheme it up. Part of that is get your 6'4" tall kid on the field and let him catch some balls in one-on-ones, right? Okay.
Who are you talking about?
Tobias freaking Merriweather. It also means things that we talked about yesterday. Using your own self-scouting to say, we have not thrown hardly at all to our number 2 tight end. And in 2 of the throws that we did throw to our number 2, I think they've attempted 3 targets to their number 2 tight end. 2 of them were on plays where he was wide open. Ohio State, play action pass, and then on a bootleg against Marshall. So use your own self-scouting that teams are going to know of you. Use your own sort of tendencies to your advantage. Yep. So out of 13 personnel and 12 personnel, especially if you go 12 personnel in a 2 tight end look, and then maybe you motion Mayer across into a trips, they're probably not paying attention to that backside guy. So you do that a couple times and then run inside zone where Mayer secures the backside, like make a real obvious Mayer's motioning, and bam, he's securing that backside edge. And then a couple times later, use that and run a bootleg throwback to the tight end, or you run a pass where you play action and, you got Mayer running this way, and then you got Eli Raridan running a wide fade or a seam or a post backside, and you look for that throw where you're using your scheme, stacking your receivers, running some post snap switches, doing some things where you clear out and get Braden Lindsey on a drag route. There's a lot of things they can do schematically to get guys in space. And I'm talking about down the field space, Ryan, a climb route, a post route, a wheel route, a seam route, something to where the team has to say, hey, if you get too aggressive against Notre Dame, they're not going to throw the ball deep all day. They're not. But if you get a little bit too peaky into the backfield, Reese is going to come up with something to throw it over your head, and Pine's able to hit it. That's part number. Well, they're able to protect it. It's part number 2. The quarterback's able to hit it. That's part number 3. And they're going to have their best players in the 4. That's part number field. That's part number 4. So scheme, line protection, quarterback making the right decision and getting it out there, and then having the right players in the field that can make those plays. Those are all the key components to this that we need to see against BYU, Ryan, because they're going – I mean, I'm just telling you, in this game and in future games against Clemson, USC, you are going to have to throw the ball down the field. Yep. And if teams don't respect that, then your running game is always going to have a cap on it, in my opinion. And so that's going to be a big part of that. That's going to be a big key component to Tommy Reese's game plan this week, is what can they do to generate plays down the field. I'm curious to see it, because I think there's a lot of boy, this would work and that'd work, and boy, this would be interesting and that'd be interesting, Ryan. I want to see what he does. Because this right here, this is his wheelhouse, this kind of stuff, Ryan. This is where Tommy Reese has been good, with the exception of a couple games early last year and the first 2 games of this year. Last 2 games, he's been pretty good about this stuff. Because part of the reason I said number 2 and 3, Ryan, there were guys open deep against Ohio State and Marshall, and they didn't get time to throw. And in other instances, they had guys open deep, and the quarterback missed. So it's not like they haven't tried. I'm not saying they haven't tried. Against Cal, they didn't try. I kind of understood it, right? In games 1 and 2, they tried. Against Carolina, they tried. So I'm not ripping on them for not trying. It's just now about, let's see them have success with it. That's where I'm coming from in this one.
It's going to be interesting, man. I'm very curious on which 6'4 plus freshman pass catcher gets the first catch of his career. Will it come this week, Brian? I'm excited to see it, man. Because, I mean, hey, you mentioned the second tight end, right? Eli Raritan, fastest 10-yard split in NFL history. And he's not even in the NFL yet. So it's I
thought we were past it and you brought it back.
Oh, man. You got to come back to it.
And Ryan brought it back in. I love it.
Oh, man. But I agree with you, man. I think that, especially because, I mean, Brian, let's be honest. If I'm BYU's defensive coordinator right now, I'm saying Caleb Hayes, I think, has just going to win one-on-ones against any receiver that he's against, right? Like, that's my mindset, because Notre Dame hasn't shown at this point that they can win in those one-on-one matchups consistently for the variety of reasons that you kind of highlighted. And I think that you have to show that you're able to win some of those, whether it's Lorenzo, whether it's Braden, whether it is Tobias Merriweather, whether it is whoever. You have to show that you can create an explosive play against some of those better pass coverage players like Caleb Hayes, because I think they're going to have some one-on-one opportunities, because at this point, based upon what you've seen, you have to feel, if you're BYU, you have to feel good about your defensive backs against Notre Dame's offensive players or offensive skill position players. So that is a massive matchup. I agree. Let's get one of these freshmen a pass, man.
Sure.
Want to see it. I want to see it.
Ryan, this kind of ties into our 4th point, and that's something that we try to do here is because you do this when you're building a game plan, right, Ryan? Especially as an offensive coordinator, your game plan is designed to kind of everything builds on each other, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what I hate is when I see offensive coordinators, and you can do it a little bit more in the NFL than in college, where it's like, okay, out of this look, they run this stuff, out of this look, they run that stuff, and it's just kind of like none of it goes together, right? Like, it should all go together. What you do formationally and with your different pre-snap looks in the run game is stuff you should use in the pass game. Stuff you're going to use in the pass game, you need to find ways to use in the run game from a looks and alignments, a movement standpoint. So that way teams aren't like, hey, look, when the running back lines up here, he's running either outside zone here or he's running a pass route. Well, the key to outside zone is where's the tight end. So when he's here and the tight end's there, you know what's coming. It's a pass. Mm-hmm. Right? When he's offset and the tight end's here, this is what they're doing. Like, you can't have those tendencies. And Notre Dame has had those problems in the past, especially, before Chip Long showed up. So you got to make sure all that stuff works together, right? And so I think a lot of these, that's how we do our keys, right? A lot of stuff kind of builds on each other. And I think the 4th key is, if Notre Dame is going to win this game, obviously Mayer needs to be a dude, and you need Lorenzo needs to play well, but I think this is a game where you're going to need your complementary players to step up and make some plays.
Yes.
We saw that against North Carolina. Logan Diggs, who didn't even play the game before, has made very little impact so far this season, steps up and has the best game of his career against North Carolina. Now, I hope that's a springboard to Logan continue to do that week after week after week, as well as Audric doing what he did and Tyree doing what he did. And then some weeks you're just going to ride in a hot hand. But, a Logan Diggs, a Braden Lindsey, who I have always felt is a complimentary player. It's a dangerous compliment, but he's a complimentary player. You got to do some things to get him going in this game, in my opinion. If other teams are not afraid of him doing things to hurt you or not afraid that you're going to scheme him, right? It's one thing for him not to make a lot of catches, another thing when you're clearly not scheming for him to do stuff that he's dangerous in. That's something I need to see. Eli Raridan, you talked about, or Holden Stace. If it's Holden Stace that they designed stuff for this week instead of Eli Raridan, or if it's Kane Barong, I don't care. It's not so much just about Eli Raridan. I mean, obviously Eli Raridan presents some unique opportunities at 6'7" and 245 pounds with the fastest 10-yard split for a tight end in the history of the world. I'm just not going to let that go this season. We'll get rid of him the offseason.
We need to make shirts about this. We need to make shirts.
Yeah. Yeah. So what that, but I don't care if it's him. Holden Stace is really dangerous. If it's Tobias Merriweather, it'd be great to see Tobias get a couple shots. My point is complementary players across the board, and that includes offensive line. Look, Josh Lugg and Zeke Correll are not the studs up front. They're not the stars. They got to play well, though. It's important that they play well. So I think those players this week more than other. I think to win big games, you don't need your complementary players to play well to beat Cal or Marshall. Mm-hmm. You just don't. But you do need them to make plays against Ohio State in more than just one. You do need them to make plays to beat BYU. You are going to need those guys to step up and make plays to beat even a team like North Carolina. I mean, we saw that with Logan Diggs. He's the guy that kind of got the offense going with that wheel route up the field. You need those guys to play well in these moments, and this is one of those games. I also think this is also a lot of my points, Ryan, and our points, I should say, are also forward-looking a little bit. Mm-hmm. The more players that you show future opponents that you better game plan for him, the better you're going to be, the harder you're going to be to defend. Right now, Notre Dame, you got to be worried about Mayer. You got to be worried about the running backs. Yes. I don't think I have to be worried about Lorenzo Styles yet. Not so much that he's not a good player, but they don't do a lot to scheme him into spaces like they did Kevin Austin late last year. I haven't seen that so far this year. Mm-hmm. So, schematically, you don't have to – you have to be prepared for him. Hey, he's a good player. Be on your game. But you don't have to be worried about scheming him, because of how Notre Dame is going to scheme for him. So do some things to make him a guy you got to prepare for. But then do things that you say, if you don't pay attention to number 0, they're going to do this. They're going to do a motion and stack him and do this. And they're going to do these other things to try to get him going. A now screen. Can we run a bubble screen for the love of all things holy? Can we get a bubble screen this year? Can we get a now screen this year? Can we get, something like that? Those type of things, Ryan, the more you do that to your complementary players, the harder it is for teams to defend you. And that's why I think it's important against BYU, but it's also going to be important to put this on film for the rest of your season for future opponents.
Brian, you were a coach. What do coaches want when they're calling an offense or defense? They want options, right? Like that's what you want, especially offensively, man. Like I want to be able to look at a play sheet and say that play will work, that play will work, that play will work, that play will work, because I know that my options that I have are making plays, right? Like to your point, there's only a couple players in this offense that you feel consistently good about that if you dial it up, they're going to make plays for me. And if those complementary pieces come to play, then that just opens up the playbook for everyone, not just the coaching staff, not just the quarterback, for all these wide receivers that we've been talking about that have potential, that haven't put it fully onto the field yet. If they are able to do it in this week, then that gives them more options as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing who will take that next step up. Because like you said, Aldrich Estime the last couple of games to start to really step up. Logan Diggs last game really step up. Is it going to be Brain Lindsay? Is it going to be Lorenzo Styles at a more high volume level? Is it going to be Tobias Merriweather? Is it going to be tight end 2? Is it going to be Deion Colsey? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't care who it is. It just needs to happen. There needs to be more options on this offense.
Right. Yeah, and you need to have options, but options that hey, I've got this that I can go to get this guy going. And I think that's going to be an important part of what Coach Reese has got to do is you got to have some stuff that hey, I know Matt Salerno can get open on this. And we saw that against North Carolina. They designed a play where, let him run a slide, and it ended up turning into an angle route, but it wasn't designed that way because Drew Pine missed him at first. If you know the play I'm talking about, like he was actually wide open on the slide and Drew just missed him. You saw that play on the all-22, right, Ryan?
Sure
where
did.
He's just wide open. And then Matt did a great job of working back to get into Drew Pine's line of sight. Like, this is why we say we've never advocated for put Matt Salerno on the bench and never play him. I've never advocated for that. It's not an either or. It's both and, right? That's the whole point. I've never said put Jaden Thomas on the bench and don't ever play him. I'm just saying use him in a more limited role and use him in areas where you know he's making plays, and don't ask him to do these other things because he's not good at that right now, and use this other kid who is good at those things and use him more. And that's kind of the point that we're making here. And and it could be Deion Colsey. I mean, we don't often talk about Deion because I'm uncertain of his health at this point in time. Like, I know he played 4 snaps against North Carolina, but is he ready to do anything other than block? I don't know what his health status is. It could be him. I mean, if they put him out and do the things that I'm asking them to do with Tobias Merriweather, and Deion plays and makes big plays, great. That's fine, because Deion Colsey's got a lot of talent too. It's just you need to get those guys into the game, and that's the point. But it doesn't mean, Matt Salerno sucks or whatever. But Matt did his job on that play, right? The times they asked Jaden Thomas to do his job on things he's comfortable with, guess what? He made the catches and got yards and did what he needed to do. And that's the thing too. And I also want to see I am curious to see, this isn't necessarily key to the game, Ryan, but I'm very curious to see how they use Lorenzo Styles this week.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, if I'm doing my self-scouting, I'm going to notice, boy, Lorenzo just statistically the last 2 years has been just way more productive in the slot. So do you use him more that way? And Ryan, I think there's an interesting thing that you brought up, that it's not really a key to the game, but when you kind of look at the points, that points 3 and 4 of the offense, there's a really interesting kind of connection that kind of weaves through those as well. And that's what you and I were discussing before the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, Brian, like if you're asking me what the strength of this team is, or the part of the team I think that presents the most conflict potentially is the second level of the defense, right? Like, because you mentioned Ben Bywater, you mentioned Peyton Wogar, you mentioned Tooley, you mentioned what was
talked about Peely yesterday.
Peely, the big thumper inside. Yeah. So they have options on the second level at linebacker. They can present a lot of multiple type of looks with those guys. I mean, there's 2 to 3 linebacker looks that you can use. There's even 4 linebacker looks that you can use at times, because they have very different skill sets. And I think for me, and this comes to the creativity of Tommy Rees that we have seen at points, right? You have to conflict that second level, and you have to make people kind of overcompensate from some mistakes from the second level, because that hurts the safeties behind them having to overcompensate if they've taken a bad run fit, or they've kind of chased a mesh route, a little too far outside the hashes, all that type of stuff. So I want to see them really manipulate the second level. How do you do that? Screens, crossing routes, play action. I want them to mess with their eye discipline. And if Notre Dame's able to do that, like we saw a little jet sweep action, we saw a little touch pass action, we've seen a little bit of screens throughout the season. I want to see even more. I want to see them really challenge that second level and make them really conflicted with what they're seeing and how they're responding of their plan of attack. Because I think if they take advantage of that second level and make them guess wrong, I think that is a big opportunity against what is a strength of this team.
Well, no, you talk about it, Ryan, and like you talk about the strength of this team. It's a good point for you to bring up, just in just a general matchup standpoint, right? Like it against this particular team, it makes a lot of sense to bring it up. But I think the last thing you said is why it's such an important point, and that is that it also fits with what your strengths are, which is tight end talent and depth and running back talent and depth. And the more you can emphasize those with those guys, but it's always not just about using them to be the guys to threaten the linebackers for plays, but it's also about using them, knowing the linebackers are going to key them to then get somebody else open behind them. That's another key, run Mayer on an option route and have him run right at the mic, and then have an angle route with your running back. And why are you doing that? Because you're trying to bang the in cut or the climb behind it, right? I mean, there's other aspects to that as well, but then also doing things to then stress those guys with the running backs and with the tight ends, so like something I would love to see Notre Dame do a little bit of this game is to kind of, you can do it out of 12 personnel, Ryan, is you can have 12 personnel. You can put, Michael Mayer into the boundary, and you can have the running back to his side, and you could be like in a 3-by-1 alignment out of two tight ends attached, or one in a wing, but you have twins to your right. You have Mayer to your left. It could be, I'm just drawing it up as to the left side of the, to the left hash, but you have Mayer as your single tight end, and you have the back on his side. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you just run Mayer on a seam route, and you run the back on like a wheel or like a wide fade, or you can run the Mayer on a wide fade and then just run a trail with your running back. But then you're really trying to isolate those linebackers. And what you're trying to do then is bring somebody else back across from the other side, whether it be the tight end or the tight end may run an in cut, and then you bring a receiver underneath. The point being, if they overplay the back and the tight end, that's why you're actually using Mayer as a decoy, unless they go one-on-one, then you throw him the freaking ball down the field. But in that instance, you're using him as a decoy, you're using your running back as a decoy, right, to get them to overplay that, bringing something behind to replace it, right? But you're stressing that second level to your point. And then you've got some kind of over the middle, high, low coming behind it, right?
Yep.
And so I think there's a lot of things like that they can do. And because of the wide fade and the cross, you have some built-in blitz beaters, because what I just advocated for is an empty personnel, right? Meaning you vacate, it's all out, okay? And so it's a 5-man protection. So the crosser, the quick crosser, is a bit of a blitz beater, as is the wide fade, depending on where the blitz comes from. So you are doing things to protect yourself out of that, but you're also then using your best personnel that teams are worried about to then set something else up, right? And, that's the kind of stuff that I'd like to see too, Ryan, which fits right in with what you talked about, which is stressing the second level of their defense, and not just doing it with your studs, but then also doing it with your complementary players. And that's a way where you could catch Braden Lindsey in a catch and run in that situation that can go for 25. And if he can make one guy miss, it can go for 50, right? Mm-hmm. Same with Lorenzo, same with, Matt Salerno. You'll get Matt Salerno. Use him like, hey, there's no way they're going to design a play for Matt Salerno. Hey, you know what? That's how you steal yards with your complementary players, right? Are they going to really think you're going to run a wide fade with your tight end and a trail with your running back, and you're going to send your other tight end on the seam so you can open up a crossing route to Matt Salerno? They're probably not planned for that, which is exactly why I could see it, right? Yeah. It's about using your complementary players to steal yards, because now your future opponents can, hey, you can't overplay Mayer or this guy, because we'll hit you with Lindsey, we'll hit you with Salerno, we'll hit you with Styles, we'll hit you with whatever. And that's the stuff I like to see, Ryan. I just think stuff like that, where you're really getting creative, are ways that you can steal yards in a game like this, and then put something on film that your next several opponents are going to be like, hey, we can't just do this because Notre Dame has figured some stuff out, which is what we saw last year. It took them a little longer last year. I hope it doesn't take them 7 games to figure it out this year. Yep. It needs to have taken 4. It needs to have been figured out now, because when you look at last year's schedule, Ryan, we've talked a lot about how the offense figured stuff out late. But what was the way that all went about, right? When you look at last year's schedule and they were able to figure some things out, when did it happen? It started to happen for USC, right? Mm-hmm. Which was after Virginia Tech, right?
Yep.
What happened in between there? Bye week.
True.
Right? That's when I say you get yourself scouting in. You figure out, okay, and what we saw them use personnel differently. They went from not using Styles hardly at all. Styles played like 8 snaps against Virginia Tech last year. Even after Joe Wilkinson got hurt the week before against Cincinnati, they still didn't use him. They used Deion Colsey a little bit, right? But they come out of the bye week, all of a sudden Styles is a part of your game plan. And what does he do against USC? Goes out there and makes plays, right? Makes some big plays for him. So, those are the things that you hope you see. Going into the USC game last year, Lorenzo Styles had 2 catches for 16 yards. Right, he had a garbage 1 catch for 2-yard now screen against Toledo, and then he had a 1 catch for 14 yards coming off the bench for Joe Wilkins in the Cincinnati game, and then hardly played at all against Cincinnati. Come out of the bye, or Virginia Tech, excuse me. Come out of the bye week, all of a sudden he has 3 catches for 57 yards against USC, right, and makes some big plays. Then he comes out the next week against North Carolina, 3 catches for 74 yards. He only has 1 catch for 4 yards against Virginia, but he rips off a run that goes for over 50 yards. Now, and it only ended up being a 37-yard run. We've talked about this. It was a 37-yard run statistically, but it was actually a 50-something-yard run that had 15 taken away from it because of a downfield receiver hold. Yep. So maybe we see that again this year. I hope so. And that's what I love about bye weeks. But that's why we need to see some of that stuff, because those are. I thought Sarkisian in 2020 was masterful with Slade Bolden. Yep. I thought he would just do things where, like, if you're going to overplay this, then we're going to go steal a 20-yard gain with Slade, and then now you're like, okay, well, then you got to defend that. And then all of a sudden, okay, then you use your back off of it or whatever. That's what the best minds do. And I want to see Ty Maurice prove himself to be that. That's what I want to see this weekend.
I never thought I heard Slade Bolden's name on this podcast, Brian.
But they did,
I'm
right?
Just with you, though. Yeah.
They did it, though. I mean, that's what we saw. It's like if you overplayed, especially when Jalen Waddle was healthy.
Oh, yeah.
You'd see, Slade would catch like a pass or two, but it'd always be like that 15-yard gain where they just weren't prepared for him. Or just like okay, well that was weird. Like he comes out against Tennessee, he doesn't catch a single pass in the first 4 games. He comes out against Tennessee and he goes 6 for 94. Right? I mean, literally didn't catch a single pass the first 4 games of the year. Well, why didn't he catch a single pass the first 4 games of the year? Said Jalen Waddle. And then he got hurt. Right? And they come out the first game without Jalen Waddle. What do? They go, Slade Bolden catches 6 passes for 94 yards. You know what I mean? Like, and you're like, oh crap, now we got to deal with Slade Bolden. It's like wonderful. The SEC title game. He only had 2 catches in the SEC title game against Florida. But you know what? They went for 40 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's stealing those yards to where, like, look, you want to overplay my dude, then we're going to steal from you. And I'm all for that. I'm not advocating stealing. Only yards in football. So anyway, that's kind of where I would like to see this go.